Josie Mills, and I'm the Director Curator of the University of Lethbridge Art Gallery, and I'm making this recording from traditional Blackfoot territory, Treaty 7 in southern Alberta. And I'm happy to continue having a chance to talk to different Manitoba artists. And today, talking with Heather, and we've never actually met before. So anyway, hello, Heather.
Hi, pleased to meet you, Josephine. I come from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, Dene people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation in Treaty 1 territory.
All right. And so you got some paintbrushes and things behind you. So I'm guessing that you're in at least a corner of your studio or the
I,
studio corner of your house, however one wants to describe it.
yes, with
Yeah.
a very cold sunshine, warm sunshine on a very, very cold day streaming in my window.
Yeah. And for Southern Alberta, it's very cold today, which is like minus 25 or something, which I imagine is balmy by Manitoba standards. But
Today, anyway, yeah.
yeah.
I woke
So
up to the wind chill, said that it was felt like minus 52. So,
ooh, yeah. Yeah, I grew up in Saskatoon, so I am familiar with that feeling that you think you might die on your way to the car. But yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about you have two projects, very ambitious and hardworking of you, on the site. Biophilia, which I keep wanting to read as Bibliophilia because I love books, but I mean, biophilia is good too, and then art in the time of COVID. So I thought we'd start with the biophilia. So what attracted you to this theme?
my study of geology and paleontology of Canada and specifically Manitoba really inspires the work. I love to explore the context that we live in, that we don't live in a static world, that it's not finished developing. And I really uh, find the Manitoba story so incredibly fascinating, how we're this central part of North America, so many things that happened. And when I go out on explorations, mostly in the summertime, I love to take photographs of things, and back in my studio, then those are some of the things that inspire me to make pieces. Um,
So when you say your studies, so is this something that you studied in school, or has this just been like an interest of yours?
an interest, yeah. Exploring. One of the really significant books, actually. I thought I had it handy here. Um, Barbara Huck and Doug Whiteway, In Search of the Canadian Ancient Heartland. This book really familiarized me with a lot of concepts and of places that I've known my whole life, and learning about so many of the things that we understand now are such new discoveries and understandings. So I really love the perspective that it gives, because it feels like we live in such an overwhelming time in terms of climate change, but to put that into context, I find very, very comforting.
Guys, yeah. I mean, the thing with the um, climate crisis is both that it's just so terrifying, and it's also just such a huge idea to grasp, and then dealing with the climate change deniers. It's been something that I've been working with artists on as well. But I mean, I think like part of the comfort for you is it the idea of like thinking about time differently?
I think so. Yeah, it's not that it excuses anything and saying, "Oh, this is natural," but seeing how many times there have been incredible changes and how new life forms come to be, new ways of being, and how it affects the people as well, and people adapting, and I think too, for me, that it really brings home the idea that technology might be helpful, but it's not going to get us out of this. It's more coming to appreciate that we are part of natural cycles, that we are part of the natural world, and we tend to think that we're not, and we can just create our own bubble, but we're so dependent on everything that's natural.
Yeah, and I think also like hearing you talk about the work, but having seen it, I think like the idea of having empathy, you know, normally people think of empathy as with other people, which is again part of our whole human-centric problem. So a project that Ed Pien did with us at the University of Lethbridge Art Gallery was around having empathy with water, which was a really nice approach. So do you think about the idea of empathy and extending that beyond like to the land and to, you know, the animals and things?
um, I don't know if I recognize it as empathy, but um, yeah, definitely. Um, actually, yeah, when I think of trees, then I would say empathy is definitely the way that I describe it. And it's like when I see the destruction of, hundreds of year old oaks, it's just such a gut reaction feeling to it. This feeling of being overwhelmed and what can I do about it? It's yeah, I guess that would be empathy because
Yeah.
we're not going to grow them that way again, right? It's and just how they serve and the whole concept of one tree does not make a forest and how we cannot grow forests. That what we're learning about trees there too. It's just there's just so much to learn, and if um, it, we won't care for things that we don't love.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we
So
feel that notion of being separated from nature.
exactly.
Yeah. My partner, Leila Armstrong, is an artist, and she's also doing a PhD about the nature culture divide. She might make a cameo and walk by because I booked this to suit my schedule, but she's a PhD student, strangely enough, also working at home. So anyway, um, but yeah, and it's so interesting with trees, like the whole reading the about the life of trees and how they communicate and then the role that mushrooms play in it. And of course, I realized like you see the mushrooms growing when a tree's been cut down. Like we had an old elm in front of our place that got, you know, sick and had to be cut down. And then all the mushrooms that popped up. And now you realize what's that about? Like actually understanding that better.
Yeah, yeah. There's just so much to explore and to learn about, and yeah.
All right, so I guess I'm supposed to be asking about art, which this is asking about the art, but yeah. So I really enjoyed watching your process. I love collage. I've just like always been like a Kurt Schwitters fan, and I also like printmaking. So do you want to like how did you come up upon this idea, this process that you use? You make the monoprints, you cut them out, you collage them, and it was really interesting to watch the video with the digital exchange and actually kind of see the process happening. So can you talk about, I guess first, like how did you develop this process?
Well, I discovered I've always loved printmaking and haven't had much opportunity to use the actual printing press, so I've always been looking for ways to do monoprinting without a press. And quite a few years ago, when I was teaching, I came across this gelatin plate and started using that in my classes and found it really accessible. And when I started publicly showing this to older adults, they kept saying, "Oh, I know what that is," and it's actually based on 1950s technology of something called the hectograph that was used to make multiple copies of things made from gelatin. And so anyway, I thought that was a neat kind of thread to where it came from. But there was something about the process that I found um, that I felt like I suddenly had things to say. Like I saw more um, ideas to me came quicker for how to develop pieces. But I love the process that I make the prints. They're random and intuitive. I don't make them usually with intention for what they're for because it's such an unpredictable process. And then it's later that I make pieces often inspired by photographs that I've taken.
So do you create kind of a bank of the monoprints, like you said, because that was one of my questions. Do you try to make these deliberately for the particular image that you're trying to create, and you just said that no, because you can't control it. But then do you just like make some of these and then have them kind of on hand?
Yeah, have them separated according to colors usually. So I have bins with the different colors, and I kind of like this constraint to say to myself, I need to use what I have,
Hmm.
and because it's often tempting. Oh, I need a bigger piece of this texture, this pattern, and nope. How can I use what I have? And that can be frustrating, but at the same time so satisfying when you are able to complete something. And it's a neat metaphor too that I have enough. I can make what I need with what I have.
That sounds like a very prairie farm sensibility, because I actually grew up in Saskatoon. So I mean, I grew up in the city, but I knew lots of people who, well, either still lived on farms when I knew them, or they came from that, which is like you use what's at hand
Yes, yes,
because that's
and
what you
and
have.
and also just the tools like for making the textures as well. Um, Initially, I started out with a lot of packaging, like cardboard and bubble wrap and those kinds of things. But I've gotten more into using things out in my yard as well, and I've come across some pretty cool things like the dried up tops of garlic, or taking the flowers, the seed heads from carrots, and using them to make things. And so it's a never-ending kind of exploration of, oh, I could use that. And I have a saying that you're a gel plate printer when you're more excited about the packaging of a present than the present itself.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, and it also makes me think of like photograms and things like that, where you, again, using the found objects and kind of incorporating them into the image making process, which can
Yeah.
be super interesting. Yeah. Okay, so then I think what I'll do is I'll ask you about the other project, Art in the Time of COVID, and then we can kind of see where we go from there. So I don't need to ask what inspired this project. So instead, I'll ask like, what's it been like being an artist during the COVID times?
Well, actually, I made a visual an example of that a while back. Hopefully, you can see it.
Yeah.
So these years represent the time in which I was working on becoming an established professional artist, and lots of up and downs. The peaks kind of are acceptance into to juried art shows and things like that, and the down parts are times of being uninspired or the rejection stuff.
Yeah.
But it was slowly going up, and just 2019, I felt like, yeah, now I'm on my way. And there was quite a few months there where it felt like, what is the point? This is such a selfish endeavor, uh, and my whole working towards things in the future just felt like, what's the point of planning it or working ahead for it, because we don't know, is there going to be money left, are galleries going to be open? There was all that kind of talk, and I wasn't inspired to do anything. And then slowly I thought, okay, yeah, I'm gonna just treat it as a gift of time where there's no pressures to do anything, just make stuff. But then, surprise, surprise, it was like all the work that I've done in this time was starting to pay off, and opportunities came in a way that, a year before I wouldn't have entertained. And initially I thought that I don't want to be part of the online classes and all of that, because I love the people part of being connected and doing workshops and galleries, like in person, right? I know what it's like to see a picture in a book and then see it in real life. It just doesn't compare. Um, but I just kept saying yes to things, and slowly got a little bit more comfortable, and being willing to learn new technologies, and so it feels now like um, at least I haven't kind of lost my place in the trajectory, but the feeling of I liked your one wording you had said, in the after times. Like, I think that's a really great way to say it, because it's not about getting back to normal. I don't even think it's about a new normal. I think we're headed for a time that it's always going to be full of surprises, and we have to keep adapting. So but I am glad for how I think everybody has realized how important the arts are for us, to our mental health and our a way of understanding what we're living in, our world. I, super important, and I'm been very grateful. It seems to me like that there has been government funding for lots of different projects, and I'm really grateful for that, and I hope it stays that way.
Yeah, I think in Canada, we're particularly lucky. I mean, we've got the strong both provincial and federal funding, and that's been super supportive for the arts. And I also, I mean, a lot of people in the arts are talking about how encouraging it is, the fact that, all sorts of different kinds of art supplies and stuff were just sold out. So that people turned to making art,
Yeah.
and that's been really, really encouraging. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what you're talking about, that, I mean, there were a lot of problems with the old normal. So when people say they want to get back to normal, it's like, do we? Do we
Yeah.
really? And yeah, so I mean, I think it's interesting. And so, what kind of things do you think you're going to carry forward from the pandemic lockdown? And I mean, and obviously, it's um, one's in a more privileged position when one can say that, when one hasn't been like directly affected um, by the illness and people passing away. But I mean, what things in terms of, like,
Yeah.
say, your art practice and your kind of approach are you going to carry forward after this lockdown?
Um, I think one thing that has really shifted, like, um, before I was always working towards specific goals, like a certain show or um, a certain body of work, and I think during this time I have kind of recovered that feeling of giving myself permission to just really experiment and play around, um, without being able to, produce those 100 pieces of crap before something great happened. I hope I can still incorporate that more and not feel this pressure to keep um, and having a really, really specific goal. I don't know that I've totally let go of it, but it is more there. And also, too, um, the habit of doing more research as well, like not just, paleontology or whatever, but um, artists, doing research on what other artists have done. Because I think during this time I've been able to, because of things being online, I've been able to go to more artist talks and get really excited about things that I'm hearing, and it always blows me away how many artists there are out there, in our province as well as in Canada. Um, it's just so interesting and fascinating, and being inspired by all that creativity. So um, before, most of those things happen in Winnipeg, and I live an hour and a half away from Winnipeg, so I often couldn't go to that kind of thing. So I really hope that that things will be live again, but that more will continue to keep offering things online so that more people have access.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a kind of like a push and pull, right? I mean, because we're located on a campus, and our campus has been, our university's been really good. They've been very cautious and careful, and we don't have a direct outside door. You have to come into a larger building to get into our gallery. So we've been closed for 11 months, and we installed an exhibition. But it's going to run till August, because we're not actually going to let in-person visitors in until semester's done. But we installed it both to complete the grant, and the artists needed to, do other things, but also mainly so that we could create really good video documentation of it. So, I mean, I think one of those things that is we have learned about the ability to connect, um, inexpensively and pretty easily. So hopefully there'd still be kind of ways of doing both, having the
Yeah.
in-person. Because I mean, I've been enjoying being able to check in, and one of the things I joined in when it was the initial broadcast, I guess, I don't, a live session, but for the digital exchange. So it was that Sarah did with Leaf Rapids. And I know you did that as well with a musician.
Yeah.
And did you find that process interesting?
It was very interesting. It was super terrifying because when I saw the artists, the other artists and musicians who were part of it, it's like I get to be with these people. So, but I worked hard at trusting that something would come for me if I was open to it, and that whole idea of being inspired by music, I really loved that. It was a neat way to be inspired to make something, and and that the surprise that the musician was inspired by one of my works too was a really neat thing. And it the idea of how to do it seems really obvious and simple to me, but it is actually quite a challenge explaining to people how it worked. um, but the other neat thing about that project was how now when I watch the others, the subsequent exchanges, it's like I have a vested interest because I was part of that program, which is a really neat kind of feeling too. And they've just been such spectacular um, projects for everybody. It's a really cool idea.
Yeah, and I mean, and the connections are just, I mean, this comes back to the thing of, like you said, that there's just so many artists out there and you have interest. And part of it is you're just so overwhelmed by all of the options. Like theoretically, you could sit down and go to everybody's websites, but how would you know which ones to go to? And
Yeah.
so partly like having this programming. So yeah, when I watched the one with Sarah in Leaf Rapids, so it turns out that Carrie from Leaf Rapids grew up in Lethbridge
Oh,
and she was
really?
talking about Alberta. And then we were just at the point of figuring out our first like video tour of this exhibition that we just put up. And I just realized that Leaf Rapids music would be perfect. So we're going to use one of their songs. So we arranged with them, to not, I don't know, hire them is the right word, but I guess pay the rights to use their
Commission,
song.
yeah.
Yeah, and so it just made this really nice connections. And that's certainly one of my favorite online events that I've had, was that, and that it just ended
Awesome.
up with these nice results. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. Um, so I guess the one thing I'd like to just ask about is like, um, when people are seeing your work, and I guess this kind of ties in with like the idea that the musician you worked with was inspired by your work, but like, what do you hope people will experience, take away when they see your work?
Um, First and foremost, I just hope that they have some personal, um, what they bring to the show, that they can connect in some way. And then I would hope that perhaps they would be inspired it would make them see something differently from the world around them, and or make them curious about the stories behind how our natural world came to be. But yeah, for the most part, just that they can connect to it from something in their own past.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that idea, that curiosity, I won't get into this. I did talk a little bit more, but then Sarah also has been and worked with them as well. But I work with a group of cognitive scientists at the University of Lethbridge. So they actually study human and non-human primates, i.e., they study monkeys. But a big part of it is that we're social animals as humans too, and curiosity. So like I know for me, the art exhibitions that have really, that I've been to just as a visitor, is when it grabs your curiosity, it piques your curiosity, that really invites you in and makes you want to look more and think about it and figure it out. And those are the ones that really kind of stay with you. So it's nice hearing you mention that idea of like,
Yeah.
it makes people feel curious about what they're looking at. All right, and then So, just a little bit, because I read a little bit on you before doing this, but so what, like, how did you become an artist? Were you like always an artist where like no blank paper was safe around you as a child? Or, what's your kind of path to be where
Yes,
you are now?
definitely. I have a very early memory of making my mark in the family piano. So, um,
And that
and I,
probably wasn't terribly welcome by the
no, no,
adults.
no. But yeah, I've always been a maker, and the arts were always very much appreciated in my family. But we were very discouraged from pursuing it as a profession, and for some reason, all four of us siblings just went along with that and didn't pursue things professionally. And yet, I'm struck by looking back how my most significant jobs were always art related. It's like that found me anyway, and
You
uh,
can run, but you can't hide from the
yeah, no,
arts.
no. And so after teaching high school art for quite a while, I decided, you know what, I want to do a second career while I still have time and energy. Um, and the things that I kind of pursued didn't work out, and I thought, okay, one of the other things I wanted to be was an artist in the school, and how do I do that? So I just started doing all the steps to getting the qualifications, and a huge thing, that idea of showing my work publicly was a big leap, and learning why that's important, that if this is given to me, that's how I say thank you, giving it back. That was really big, and so that's kind of just led to the things developing. And I really love being in the art community, and it feels like another universe. And so, and it's such a great second career because on the internet and in the art world, it doesn't your age doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I can just keep learning and
Yeah.
creating.
Yeah, and I find like I like I like making things. I mean, I've always been from the writer curator side, but I really like doing things like knitting and felting and ceramics. But I find that it's like that process. It really does just kind of like you get into another kind of zone, and you're able to just kind of you're more like in tune with just kind of like letting things flow along rather than trying to like intellectually grasp them. And then that's where you have like these wonderful insights and things like that. So
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, that when you're a maker, the world just looks different.
yeah, yeah. And I think also like it's one of the things I've tried to a big part of what we do for the U of L Art Gallery is incorporate making for the visitors experience.
Hmm.
So whether it's directly tied to the exhibitions or just that we in the before times, we do it in the gallery. We're currently doing things like this online, but we have like a knitting noon hour. So there's just something really nice about sitting in a gallery and knitting, or we do Blackfoot beading. And it doesn't have to be tied to the exhibition, right? But
Right.
it allows you to like interact with people and
Yes.
with the space around you differently. So
Yes. Yes, and I love that too. That it's an answer to that thing of do not touch when you're in a gallery, right? It does give people a physical experience when they can do something in that
yeah,
space. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I would imagine that it would be super fun to do like workshops with you, like looking at the video of the process. I'm just like, ooh, that looks really fun. But
I just love watching people, the joy of discovering it. Often people will be hesitant, like when I have open houses or whatever, they'll be hesitant to, but then when they do, it's this shot of happiness because the results are so instantaneous, and it's very cool. Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, we're at our time, so I get to say thank you, and this has been a really good conversation.
Well, thank you so much for doing this with me.